Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. The sound of her breath, shallow and quick, was all that remained in the sterile, cold silence of the observation room. Lieutenant Commander Elara Dawson stood by the reinforced glass, her eyes locked on the alien figure across the room. She had been chosen for this moment, and yet, nothing in her extensive training had prepared her for the overwhelming tide of emotions that surged through her as she gazed at the creature on the other side. The alien, known only as Ilith, from the distant and enigmatic Zareth system, was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Its form shimmered with iridescent hues, its translucent skin catching the artificial light and casting ripples of colors on the walls. Its 6 limbs were delicate yet strong, each tapering into graceful points, ending with hands that seemed capable of both touch and manipulation beyond the understanding of human technology. The creature's face, if one could call it that, was a mixture of smooth contours and dark, reflective eyes that seemed to shimmer with untold knowledge. This was the first time a human had been this close to an alien intelligence, and the weight of that responsibility was almost too much to bear. Elara felt the familiar weight of her uniform, the precision-engineered fabric pressing against her chest as if reminding her that she was here for a reason, humanity's first contact with another sentient species. But despite her military training, despite the decades of preparation, the daunting reality of the moment was inescapable. A soft chime echoed through the room, a signal from the control room. Elara tapped the comm on her wrist and immediately heard the voice of her superior, Captain Aldrin. Lieutenant Commander Dawson, his voice was steady, calm. Are you ready to proceed with the communication? Elara glanced over at the glowing display on the wall, which showed a translation matrix designed to break down the alien's language. It had taken years of study, countless tests, and an exhaustive effort to decode even the most basic symbols and gestures that Ilith had offered during initial encounters. But this was different. This was the next step. I'm ready, Captain, she replied, trying to steady the fluttering in her chest. Proceeding now. As she activated the console, a soft hum filled the room. The translation matrix illuminated, casting an eerie blue light on the walls. She could feel the weight of Ilith's gaze, the alien's intelligence keenly aware of every movement she made. She had studied its physiology, its patterns, and yet now, in the face of the unknown, she was keenly aware of how little she truly understood. With a steady hand, Elara spoke the first words that humanity would offer to this species. Ilith, we come in peace. We wish to learn, to understand, and to forge a bond between our worlds. The words seemed simple enough, but as she spoke, she could feel the enormous implications of what she was doing. She was the bridge between two worlds, and whatever response came from the alien could change the course of human history forever. For a long moment, nothing happened. The alien's expressionless face remained unchanged, its dark eyes unwavering. Then, a soft ripple passed over its skin, and the air in the room seemed to shimmer with a strange energy. Slowly, Ilith extended one of its delicate limbs toward the glass, its fingers touching the surface as if making an unspoken gesture. Elara's heart skipped a beat. It was as if the alien was trying to communicate something deeper, something beyond words. Without warning, the translation matrix flickered to life. A series of symbols appeared, shifting across the screen at lightning speed, a complex web of data that was almost too much for the system to process. Elara watched, her breath held, as the symbols coalesced into a coherent message. Humanity, fragile, yet fierce. A heartbeat that echoes across the stars. We, Ilith, offer our embrace. The words appeared slowly, deliberately, as if the alien were choosing them carefully. Elara's mind raced. The phrase "we offer our embrace" was not just a greeting, it was an invitation. An invitation to something deeper. Something that, in all her years of training, she had never anticipated. Before she could respond, the room seemed to darken, and a soft, melodic hum filled the air. Ilith's form began to shift, its 6 limbs folding gracefully around its body, as if preparing to enter a state of deep contemplation. Elara could sense the alien was waiting for her to act, but the weight of the decision paralyzed her. To accept its embrace would mean stepping into the unknown, opening herself up to a bond that could span not just worlds, but dimensions of existence beyond human comprehension. Her mind raced. What would it mean for humanity if she accepted? Would they be forever altered by this alien connection? Would their hearts, once bound to earth, now beat in unison with an intelligence from the stars? Her gaze met the reflection of her own eyes in the glass. She saw the uncertainty there, but also something else, something that was undeniably human, a spark of curiosity. Of hope. Of a desire to understand and to connect. The chime on her wrist sounded again. Captain Aldrin's voice crackled through, cutting through the tension. "Lieutenant Commander, we're monitoring your progress. Do you need further assistance?" Elara's finger hovered over the comm device, but for the first time, she didn't feel the need to answer. She didn't need the captain's guidance, nor the assurances of her colleagues. The decision was hers alone to make. And in that moment, she knew what she had to do. She turned back to the alien, taking a slow step forward. The glass between them seemed to fade as she reached out, her hand poised to meet its touch. In her heart, she could hear the faint rhythm of a human heartbeat, steady and unwavering. And with that, she made her choice. Elara's hand trembled ever so slightly as she extended it toward the glass. Her breath was shallow, but steady, as though her very soul understood the gravity of this moment. Her fingers hovered just above the transparent barrier separating her from Ilith, whose form shimmered in the dim light, watching her with those impossibly deep, reflective eyes. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. For the longest time, nothing happened. It was as if time itself had paused, waiting for the fateful gesture to unfold. Elara's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears like a drum, urging her forward. She could hear the faint hum of machinery in the background, the soft buzz of the translation matrix still glowing faintly beside her, but it all felt distant, muffled by the growing connection that seemed to stretch between herself and the alien. Then, slowly, Ilith's delicate limbs began to move. The alien's graceful form shifted, its 6 arms folding inward, the iridescent skin rippling with an energy Elara couldn't explain. There was no sudden rush of motion, no violent gesture. Instead, it was as if the creature was preparing to synchronize with her, matching the pace of her thoughts, of her heartbeat. Elara's breath hitched as the alien's nearest limb pressed lightly against the glass, its fingers extending in a gesture that mirrored her own. Slowly, reverently, it closed the distance. She could feel a strange pull within her chest, as though the alien was reaching beyond the physical barrier, offering something intangible yet profoundly intimate. Her hand quivered in the air, her pulse quickening, and without realizing it, she took a step closer. For a moment, they were both still, locked in this silent communion. Her fingertips almost touched the glass where the alien's arm rested, her body an anxious mirror of Ilith's stillness. The world outside the chamber had become a distant memory. There were no other voices, no demands, only the presence of the alien and the pulse of her own existence. Then, as if by some unspoken command, the glass between them began to shimmer. It was a subtle change at first, like the slightest shift in the air, a delicate hum that reverberated through the walls. Elara instinctively pulled her hand back, startled. The glass, the barrier that had held humanity and alien apart for so long, was beginning to dissolve. Not in a violent shatter, but in a slow, almost reverent transformation. The surface of the glass seemed to warp, bending inwards as though the very fabric of reality was being rewritten. Ilith's glowing limbs remained steady, unwavering, its gaze locked onto hers. Then, from deep within the alien's chest, a sound reverberated, a low, melodic hum that seemed to resonate with the very core of Elara's being. It was neither a voice nor a noise, but something deeper, an oscillation that reverberated in her bones, in her soul. It was as if the alien was singing, not with sound, but with the pure essence of its being. The air between them hummed with energy, and Elara felt it, a tug at her consciousness. It was like the bond they were forming was not just physical but mental, a bridge between thoughts, an exchange of awareness that passed through the very walls of the chamber. Her heart raced in a strange harmony with the alien's pulse. Without thinking, Elara took another step forward. This time, there was no hesitation. The barriers had already begun to collapse, and she knew instinctively that the moment was now. A soft, almost imperceptible light flickered from the walls, casting their shadows in strange, alien shapes. The boundaries between them were all but gone. Ilitha's limb moved again, and this time, it was not just an extension, it was an invitation. The creature's arm stretched forward, the translucent skin gently brushing the air as if reaching out to take her hand. Elara gasped, feeling a surge of emotions she could not place. Fear, awe, curiosity, all tangled together in her chest. She stood at the threshold of something unfathomable, something beyond her comprehension, and yet, in that moment, the fear faded. She could not ignore the pull any longer. Whatever this was, it was undeniable. Her hand reached out, trembling, to meet the alien's touch. The moment her skin made contact with the creature's soft, shimmering form, something extraordinary happened. A jolt of energy coursed through her, a sensation like nothing she had ever felt. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like a rush of understanding that flooded her senses. She saw visions, not with her eyes, but in the depths of her mind. Glimpses of alien landscapes, galaxies far away, civilizations that existed in the vast expanse of the universe. Time and space seemed to bend as she saw the rise and fall of worlds, the birth of stars, and the silent death of forgotten realms. She felt herself drifting, losing herself in the alien memories, and yet there was something deeply comforting about it. The images were not alien to her, they were familiar, like echoes of something buried deep within her own consciousness. The alien was showing her its world, its history, its knowledge. In return, Elara felt the flicker of humanity within her. She felt the stories of her people, their struggles, their triumphs, their journeys across the stars. She felt the pulse of Earth beneath her feet, the connection between all of humankind, stretching back through millennia of civilization. The heartbeat of humanity was strong, unwavering, and full of life. And in that moment, she understood. The alien was not just offering knowledge, it was offering itself, a connection, a bond, an understanding. A bridge between two worlds, and through that bond, they could learn from each other. The flood of sensations gradually began to subside, and Elara's feet found solid ground once more. She drew a shaky breath, her mind reeling from the overwhelming torrent of thoughts, memories, and emotions. The connection was still there, faint but tangible, like a thread that stretched between her heart and the alien's. She looked up, her eyes meeting Ilitha's once more. This time, the alien did not appear so alien. It had become something else, something she could understand, something she could reach out to. A partner. A companion. A being of vast, incomprehensible wisdom, but also one that shared in the same primal need for connection. The room was silent again, but now it was a silence filled with mutual understanding. Elara opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. She was overwhelmed, unsure of how to respond to something so profound, something so vast. But then, slowly, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Together," she said. "We move forward. Together." Ilitha's iridescent skin rippled, and Elara could feel the alien's presence in her mind, the quiet affirmation of its agreement. A bond had been formed, a bond that transcended language, that bypassed the need for complex symbols and gestures. It was a connection that ran deeper than either species could fully comprehend, but it was real. And it was theirs. Humanity and the Zorethian people were no longer two separate entities, they were bound, in heart and spirit, between two worlds. Elara stood there for what felt like an eternity, her hand still lightly touching Ilitha's delicate, shimmering limb. The air in the chamber felt alive with energy, as though the very walls were vibrating with the resonance of their bond. A bond that was not merely physical, but something deeper, something beyond the realm of comprehension. It was as though the heartbeat of humanity and the pulse of the Zorethian world had synchronized in that single, fleeting moment. The alien, or rather, Ilith, for she now knew its name in her heart, did not pull away. It remained still, its 6 limbs folded gracefully, its gaze unwavering. There was no need for words. It was enough for Elara to simply feel the presence of the creature, to know that they were both connected in a way that transcended the boundaries of species. As the initial rush of sensations began to subside, Elara slowly withdrew her hand, though the faint echo of the connection lingered. She felt it deep within her, like a thread linking her to Ilith and to something far greater than herself. She could still sense the alien's awareness, like a shadow at the edge of her thoughts, its silent presence a constant reminder of their shared experience. Elara, a voice crackled through her wrist calm, pulling her from the depths of the moment. It was Captain Aldrin, his tone clipped but with an undertone of concern. "Lieutenant Commander, are you?" "I'm fine, Captain," Elara interrupted, her voice hoarse. She wasn't sure what to say, what to do in this moment. Words felt inadequate after everything that had just transpired. She glanced down at the glowing translation matrix, still flickering with symbols, but they seemed insignificant now, like a forgotten language. What just happened? Aldrin's voice was tinged with disbelief. "We saw the reading spike." "What was that energy surge?" Elara took a steadying breath, her pulse still racing. "It was the first contact, a communion, if you will," she said softly, her voice trembling. "The connection is deeper than we anticipated. It's not just about language or technology. Ilith and we've joined in some way." There was a long pause on the other end of the comm. She could almost hear the captain's mind whirring, processing what she had just said. Finally, his voice returned, calmer now but still filled with caution. "We need to debrief. Return to the Central Command immediately. We'll need all the data on this." Elara's gaze shifted to Ilith, whose form was still radiant with that otherworldly glow. The alien hadn't moved, but she could sense a subtle shift in the atmosphere. It was as though it had heard the captain's words, felt the change in her tone. And yet, Ilith did not seem concerned. It merely waited, like a patient teacher awaiting a student's next move. "I'll be there shortly," Elara replied, though she knew in her heart that the captain could not fully understand what had happened. How could he? No one could. The connection, however strange and new, was something she knew was beyond the scope of human technology and comprehension. It was something that could not be captured in data streams or reduced to numbers on a screen. It was an experience that had touched her very soul, and it had left an imprint that would not easily fade. She turned away from the observation window, but she could not tear herself completely from the alien. A part of her remained tethered to Ilith, just as the alien's presence seemed to persist in the periphery of her mind. She couldn't explain it, but it was there, a constant hum, like a second heartbeat echoing in her chest. The halls of the research facility were eerily quiet as Elara walked through them. The muted hum of the facility's life support systems was the only sound, and even that seemed distant, like a faint murmur from another world. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, but she could not bring herself to look back at the observation room. Not yet. She needed time to process what had happened. By the time Elara reached the Central Command, a group of scientists and officers had already gathered around the large holographic display, analyzing the readings from the previous encounter. Their faces were tense, a mixture of excitement and confusion. Captain Aldrin was there, as expected, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the data swirl on the screen. He turned as Elara entered, his expression unreadable. Without a word, he gestured to the display. "What happened in there, Elara?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. "We need answers." Elara took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. The images, the sensations, the connection with Ilith, all of it rushed through her mind again, threatening to overwhelm her. She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the steady rhythm of her breath, trying to ground herself. "I don't think I can give you all the answers, Captain," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of the truth she had come to understand. The bond, it's not just about communication. It's not just about understanding each other through language or gestures. Aldrin's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt. He understood the gravity of her words, but he couldn't quite grasp the full scope of what she was saying. No one could. "I felt it," Elara continued, her voice growing stronger, more certain. "Ilith and I, we shared something deeper than any of us expected. A connection that goes beyond physical touch, beyond words. It's like, we understand each other in ways that defy logic." The room was silent as the others absorbed her words, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. They were scientists, trained to rely on evidence, on facts. But there was no evidence, not in the traditional sense. What Elara was describing was a bond that couldn't be quantified, a communion that didn't fit into the neat boxes of their data. "We need to continue the dialogue," Elara said, her tone firm now. "We need to build on this, not just for humanity's sake, but for the sake of understanding the universe and our place in it." Captain Aldrin studied her for a long moment before speaking, his voice measured. "I understand the importance of this. But we can't move forward without the proper analysis, Elara. We need to control the situation. We need to ensure it's safe." "I know," she replied, her voice soft but resolute. "But this isn't something we can control. It's something we have to experience, something we have to learn from. It's about trust, Captain. Trust between us and them. Between us and the stars." The silence stretched on, but Elara could feel the shift in the room. The others were listening now, their minds turning over her words. The truth was, they had no other choice. Humanity had come into contact with a species that could not be understood by their current methods. But maybe, just maybe, they didn't need to fully understand it. They needed to embrace it. And as she looked around the room, she realized that the first step had already been taken. Humanity had reached out to the stars. And now, the stars had reached back. The days following Elara's communion with Ilith were filled with a strange stillness. The excitement of the first contact still hung in the air, but it was tinged with uncertainty. Humanity's scientists and military officials were scrambling to make sense of what had occurred, but none of them had the words to describe what Elara had experienced. It wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It wasn't even a simple exchange of ideas. It was something beyond comprehension, beyond anything they had prepared for. The initial debriefings were cold, clinical, almost detached. Elara was questioned relentlessly by experts, all of them seeking something they could grasp, some tangible data, a blueprint for understanding this new reality. But how could she explain the feeling that had coursed through her, the overwhelming sensation that the universe itself had opened up just beyond her reach? "You're certain it was a connection?" Captain Aldrin had asked her on the second day after the encounter. His brow furrowed in concern as they sat together in the command center, reviewing the data. "I don't know how else to describe it," Elara had replied, staring at the holographic screen that displayed the raw data from the chamber. "It wasn't just an exchange of information. It was a sharing of awareness. I felt Ilith in ways that go beyond what I understand. It was as though it felt me, felt the essence of humanity. It wasn't an intellectual exchange. It was emotional, visceral." The captain had nodded, though his eyes had clouded with uncertainty. "We need to approach this with caution, Lieutenant. We still don't know what we're dealing with. Whatever this connection is, we must be prepared for the consequences." Elara agreed with him in principle, but in her heart, she could not shake the sense that this was something more than they were ready for. It was a potential that humanity had never encountered before. And yet, despite the uncertainty, there was a part of her that knew, deep down, that this connection could change everything. For both humans and Zorethians. The next meeting with Ilith was arranged a week later. The chamber where the two had first made contact had been reinforced, ensuring that no unforeseen event would disrupt the delicate balance between them. A team of researchers and security personnel stood by, monitoring the situation from the observation room. But Alara insisted on being alone with the alien once more. She was the bridge between two worlds, and this moment felt too sacred to share with anyone else. As she entered the observation room, she was greeted by the same peaceful stillness. The translucent walls of the chamber glowed faintly, casting soft shadows on the floor. Ilith was there, waiting, its form radiating a gentle light that seemed to fill the space around it. There was no sense of aggression, no threat. Just the presence of something ancient and profound. Alara stepped forward, her heartbeat steady in her chest. She had prepared herself for this meeting, even though a part of her was still unsure of what to expect. The bond they had shared, however brief, had left an indelible mark on her. And though the scientific community demanded answers, she knew that some questions could not be answered through data alone. She approached the glass, slowly, as if the space between them held a sacred weight. She could feel the alien's presence before her hand even made contact with the transparent barrier. It was an unspoken connection, a subtle pulse of understanding that seemed to echo from its very being. "I've been thinking," Alara spoke softly, her voice resonating in the empty space. "About what happened. About what we shared." There was no response from Ilith, but Alara felt the alien's awareness wash over her like a gentle tide, its presence shifting subtly, as if inviting her to continue. "The scientists, they don't understand," she continued, the words flowing more easily now. "They're looking for something they can quantify, something that fits within their framework. But I don't think this can be understood that way. It's not just knowledge, is it? What we share goes deeper. It's alive. It's a connection that defies the boundaries we've built for ourselves." Her words were soft, but she spoke with a clarity that surprised her. It was as though the alien was helping her understand herself, helping her articulate thoughts and feelings she hadn't fully grasped until now. She felt a strange warmth in her chest as she spoke, like a quiet reassurance, a confirmation that what she had experienced was real. For a long moment, there was only silence between them. Then, Ilith's limbs began to move, its form shifting in the low light. Alara's heart quickened as the alien extended one of its arms toward the glass once more, its delicate fingers pressing against the transparent surface. This time, however, there was no barrier between them. The glass had dissolved completely, leaving nothing but air between them. Alara stepped forward, her breath catching in her throat. It was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when the connection would be tested, when she would truly understand what Ilith was offering, and what she was willing to give in return. Without hesitation, she placed her hand against the alien's. The sensation was instantaneous. It was as though every nerve in her body was alive, every synapse firing in a cascade of sensory overload. But it wasn't painful, it was intense, like the very fabric of her consciousness was being stretched, pulled into a new, uncharted space. The connection between them deepened, and Alara felt her mind and soul entwine with Ilith's. She wasn't sure if the alien was transmitting images or emotions, or if it was merely the flood of new information and understanding washing over her. But she felt herself falling, plunging into the depths of its mind, its history, its culture, its way of being. And in return, she shared her own essence, her own experiences, memories of Earth, of humanity's struggles and triumphs. She saw flashes of Zorethian civilization, vast cities of translucent crystal, suspended in the air like delicate flowers. She felt the warmth of their suns, the coolness of their night skies. She understood the deep harmony that existed between the Zorethians, their symbiosis with their planet, their unbreakable connection to the land they had nurtured for millennia. And then, she felt the loneliness. The isolation. The longing. Zorethians, for all their wisdom and peace, had never known a species like humanity. They had never known the complexity of human emotion, the drive that propelled humans to explore, to discover, to push beyond their limits. And in the depths of the connection, Elara realized that this bond was not just a bridge, it was a two-way street. Humanity offered something to the Zorethians that they had never known, a raw, untamed fire. A drive to push forward, even when the path was uncertain. Elara's heart surged with understanding, and she realized then that their connection wasn't just a meeting of minds. It was a fusion of their spirits, a blending of their essence that would shape both their futures. She slowly withdrew her hand, her breath ragged as she tried to process the flood of emotions and images that had rushed through her. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but there was no fear. Only an overwhelming sense of connection. Ilith remained still, its gaze unwavering. The alien had shown her its depths, and now she understood. There was no turning back. The bond between them was unbreakable. And through it, humanity would never be the same. Elara, Captain Aldrin's voice crackled through her calm, his tone urgent. We've been monitoring the chamber. We need to speak with you immediately. Elara stood still for a moment, her mind still reeling from the depths of the connection. But she knew one thing for certain, humanity had crossed into a new age. And whether they were ready or not, the future had already begun. The next few hours felt like a blur to Elara. Her connection with Ilith had opened a door to something vast, something incomprehensible. She had stepped through that door willingly, and now she could feel the weight of the unknown pressing in on her. The bridge between humanity and the Zorethians had been forged, but with it came new challenges, questions, and, most importantly, an unsettling realization. The moment she left the observation chamber, her mind was still reeling. She could barely keep her thoughts in order. Everything she had seen, everything she had felt, was still unfolding within her. She had experienced glimpses of Zorethian history, culture, and emotion, but now she realized that she was not just a passive observer. She was part of something, a link between two worlds. A bridge that was both fragile and unyielding. Her calm buzzed again, this time more insistently. Elara, report to the command center. Immediately. It was Captain Aldrin. His tone was more urgent than before, and she knew that whatever was coming next, it wasn't going to be easy. When she arrived in the command center, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The usual hum of activity had been replaced by a strange stillness. The other officers and researchers were gathered around the large central screen, their faces drawn, their eyes tired. The data streams were still flickering, but they were no longer filled with the usual optimism. Something had changed. Captain Aldrin stood by the screen, his arms folded. He glanced at her as she entered, his expression unreadable. Elara, he said quietly, we need to talk. About what's happening. She nodded, though she wasn't sure what he meant. Her own thoughts were scattered, struggling to make sense of the flood of sensations and information from the past few hours. What's going on, Captain? The Zorethians, he began, his voice low, they've stopped responding to our attempts at communication. They've completely cut off all signals. No transmissions. No movements. We can't reach them. It's like they've disappeared. Elara's stomach tightened. She had felt Ilitha's presence just moments ago, hadn't she? The bond was still there, like an invisible thread tugging at her consciousness. She had felt the alien, but now, in the silence of the command center, she began to doubt herself. Had Ilith truly vanished? Was it possible that the connection they shared had been severed so suddenly? She moved toward the screen, her eyes scanning the data. The readings showed a sharp drop in energy emissions from the Zorethian ship. There was no sign of movement, no indication that the alien race was even present anymore. But we were just in contact, Elara said, her voice rising in disbelief. I was in the chamber. Ilith, it was there. We shared. We know, Elara, Aldrin cut in. But something's wrong. We've sent several probes, and they're being blocked. Not by anything we've encountered before. The energy fields surrounding their ship are intensifying. They're shutting us out. Her heart raced. This was not what she had expected. The connection she had felt with Ilith had been so real, so alive. How could it just disappear so suddenly? Was it possible that the alien race had grown disinterested? Or was something more sinister at play? She turned back to the officers, her mind spinning. We need to get back to the chamber. There has to be something we're missing. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. But Aldrin's face hardened. It's not a misunderstanding, Lieutenant. Something has changed. And we need to be prepared for whatever that is. The journey back to the observation chamber felt longer than it had the first time. Ilara's mind was clouded with doubt. What had happened? Was Ilith's presence truly just a temporary connection, an emotional bridge that had burned out as quickly as it had ignited? Or was there something deeper, something more insidious happening that she couldn't yet comprehend? When she arrived at the chamber, she expected to feel the usual hum of the connection. But it was silent. The air felt still, the very space around her seemed empty. She approached the observation window, staring out at the Zerethian vessel. Its once radiant surface now appeared cold and lifeless. Ilith was gone. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself otherwise, Ilara knew that wasn't the whole story. She could still feel it, a faint echo, a whisper in the back of her mind. The bond had not been severed entirely. Something was lingering, something that was beyond her control. She reached out again, pressing her hand to the glass. Nothing happened. No sudden surge of energy. No overwhelming presence. A soft chime came from her wrist calm, snapping her out of her thoughts. Lieutenant Commander, Aldrin's voice crackled through. We've had a breakthrough. We're getting a signal. It's faint, but it's coming from the Zerethian ship. It's coming from Ilith. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. The sensation of the connection surged within her, but it was different now. It was distant, muffled. Ilith was there, but it felt as though it were buried beneath layers of something else. I'm on my way, she replied quickly, her voice trembling with the sudden rush of emotions. She could feel the pull again, the desire to reach out, but it was as though she were being held back by an invisible force. The alien presence was not as accessible as it had been before. But it was still there. When she arrived at the comm station, the technician looked up at her, his face pale. The signal, Lieutenant Commander, he said, gesturing toward the screen. It's coming in bursts, like it's being filtered through something. But it's Ilith. A burst of static filled the room, followed by a series of strange sounds, unlike anything Ilara had ever heard. The signal was fractured, broken, but it was unmistakably Zerethian. The message was garbled, incomprehensible, but it was real. There was something in it, something familiar. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the signal stopped. Ilara stood frozen, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. She had felt it. The connection hadn't been severed. It had been hidden, cloaked in something she couldn't understand. The silence, the sudden disappearance, it was not the end. It was the beginning of something far more complex, far more dangerous than anything humanity had ever prepared for. I'll need to speak with Ilith, Ilara said quietly, the resolve settling in her chest. We need to understand what's happening. Whatever they're trying to tell us, we're not getting the full message yet. Captain Aldrin didn't reply immediately. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his expression tight with concern. Do you think they're trying to communicate, Ilara? Or are we looking at something else? She didn't know the answer. But she was certain of one thing, the Zerethians were not abandoning them. They were trying to tell them something. And humanity was not ready for what came next. The silence in the command center was oppressive. Ilara stood before the screen, her fingers clenched into fists at her sides as she tried to process the fractured signal. The momentary connection they had experienced with Lilith, this strange, transcendent bond, had been severed, but not by the alien's will. It was as if something had intervened, cutting them off from a deeper understanding. But why? And what did it mean for the future? Captain Aldrin's voice broke the silence. "Lieutenant, we need to talk. This isn't just about a diplomatic misunderstanding. Something much larger is at play here. I can feel it." Elara turned to face him, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. The captain's usually confident demeanor had been replaced with the shadow of uncertainty. His eyes flickered with concern as he met her gaze, knowing that the answers they were looking for were slipping further and further out of reach. "What are we dealing with, Captain?" Elara's voice was steady, but the underlying anxiety was palpable. This is more than a lost signal, more than a failed communication. We're not just seeing a diplomatic breakdown. We're dealing with something bigger." Aldrin exhaled slowly, his eyes on the screen. "The Zorethians didn't just cut us off. They didn't disconnect on their own. It's as if someone or something else is holding them back, manipulating their presence. The question is, who or what could do that?" Elara felt a sudden chill creep over her skin. It was a sensation she couldn't shake, like a weight pressing down on her chest. What had they missed? What had they failed to see? "We need to reconnect," she said, the resolve settling in her voice. "We need to find out what Lilith is trying to tell us. The message, it's not over yet." Captain Aldrin gave a sharp nod. "Agreed. But we'll have to tread carefully. We can't afford to make any more mistakes. Not after this." The atmosphere in the observation chamber was eerily quiet. The Zorethian ship, once a glowing beacon of hope and wonder, now seemed distant and cold. The alien presence that had filled the room just days before was now only a faint echo, like a distant star that had flickered out of existence. Elara stood before the chamber, her hand pressed against the cool surface of the glass. She could feel the weight of the connection still there, but it was faint. Something was blocking it, something darker than she had anticipated. She closed her eyes, focusing on the faint pulse in the back of her mind, the lingering thread of the bond that remained. She reached for it, allowing herself to be pulled into the void. The feeling was like sinking into deep water, her mind stretching and expanding, trying to find the source of the disturbance. And then, she felt it. A presence, but not one she recognized. It was darker than Lilith's. It was cold and calculating. It wasn't the alien she had come to know, but something else, something malevolent. It was as though a shadow had fallen over the connection, blotting out the warmth and light she had once felt. Elara's breath quickened. She struggled to reach deeper, to connect with Lilith, but the presence remained, pulling at her, blocking her access. It was like trying to grasp onto something slippery, something that refused to be held. "What is this?" she thought, her mind racing. Then, the presence responded, not in words, but in feelings. Fear. Resignation. A deep, pervasive sadness that curled through her like a poisonous vine. It was as though the alien was trapped, its will bent by something far stronger, far more dangerous. But just as quickly as it had come, the sensation faded. The presence was gone, and all that was left was silence. Elara opened her eyes, her pulse racing. Her hand trembled against the glass. What had just happened? Was that Lilith? Or had she glimpsed something else, something hidden beneath the surface of the Zorethian race? Elara? Captain Aldrin's voice broke through her thoughts. What did you see? What did you feel? Elara turned, her face pale. I felt it. There's something else, something that's controlling them. It's not just a communication breakdown. The Zorethians are being manipulated, Captain. There's something out there that's blocking them. It's not Lilith's will. It's something else. Aldrin's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? That someone is controlling the Zorethians? Elara nodded slowly. Yes. And it's powerful. It feels like a force is keeping them from connecting with us. Ilith is trapped, and whatever is doing this, it's hunting. Captain Aldrin's face tightened as he absorbed her words. Then it's no longer a question of diplomacy, is it? This is something far more dangerous. Back in the command center, the entire crew was on edge. The engineers were working to stabilize the comms, hoping to regain any sort of reliable signal. But Elara's mind was far from the technical aspects of the problem. She was still haunted by the shadowy presence she had felt, a presence that lingered just beyond the veil of her consciousness. "Lieutenant Commander, we've got something," one of the engineers called out, breaking Elara from her thoughts. "It's weak, but it's a message. It's from the Zorethian ship." Elara rushed to the station, her heart hammering in her chest. The signal was faint, distorted by interference, but it was unmistakable. And this time, it was unmistakably Ilith. But the message wasn't what they had expected. It wasn't a peaceful greeting or a continuation of their bond. It was a warning. Do not approach. They are watching. They will destroy. The voice that echoed through the speakers was Ilith's, but it was tinged with an unnatural rasp, a distortion that sent a chill down Elara's spine. "They're not alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Whatever's controlling them, it's here. It's watching us." Captain Aldrin stepped forward, his expression grim. "We need to prepare for the worst. If the Zorethians are under the control of something hostile, we have no idea what we're dealing with. This could escalate quickly." The gravity of the situation hit Elara like a physical blow. The message was clear now. The Zorethians weren't just unwilling to make contact, they were being forced into silence, and whatever was behind it wasn't just watching them. It was waiting. "We need to find out what this force is, and fast," Elara said, her voice steady with resolve. "If we wait too long, it will be too late. The Zorethians aren't our enemies. Whatever's controlling them is." But even as she spoke, a dark thought crept into her mind: what if it's already too late? The Zorethian ship remained still, its once vibrant energy now reduced to a flicker. The connection between humanity and the alien race, so full of promise, was now frayed and uncertain. Elara knew that time was running out. The dark presence was growing stronger, and whatever force lay behind it, humanity was no longer just a curious observer. They had become part of the conflict, whether they were ready or not. And the true battle, between light and shadow, between hope and despair, had only just begun. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.